Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nithya Ramachandra from the NR Sports Show. This is episode 820, joined by a really special guest. His name is Ryan Field. He's a sports reporter slash anchor for ABC. He does a great stuff covering sports, all sports, and I'm glad to have him on the show today. It's truly an honor, and thank you, Ryan, for joining the show. And how are you guys doing?
Nathan, pleasure to be on with you today. 820 episodes. Congratulations to you, my friend. That's great.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome stuff.
Yeah. So I want to start off with your childhood growing up, and when did you get interested in getting into sports? And did you have like a role model growing up in the sports industry as a reporter?
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, and growing up, I loved playing sports, soccer, tennis, basketball. When I got to my high school, I realized I wasn't good enough to play for any of my teams, so I had to be involved with sports in another capacity. So I became the sports editor at my school paper, a position I held all 4 years in high school, interviewing athletes and all the sort. And when I got to college at Michigan State, I wanted to expand my horizons, and I did some radio and I did some television, fell in love with TV, and have been doing it ever since. And that goes back more than 2 decades now, crazy to say. Growing up as a kid in the industry, I always admired a guy like Bob Costas, who was so solid throughout his career and still is to this day. Just always telling it like it is, very professional. The game was never about him, it was always about the game. And I just like the way he handled himself on the biggest of stages. And that's something I always strive to achieve in my career.
So take me back to your first gig and when you started doing interviews and writing articles and or even covering sports. Take me back to that first gig. Were you nervous going in? What was your mindset going through?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're always nervous when you're, starting out on a new venture, so to speak. And, I was doing interviews in high school, but then you get to college and I was interviewing some of the guys on the football team and some of the guys on the basketball team, guys that I had seen on TV, watching the games. And obviously there was a little trepidation doing that. And then you start your career and you're interviewing professional athletes. I remember distinctly interviewing Grant Hill. He was my first like big time professional athlete when he was playing for the Pistons. And, I definitely had some butterflies to be sure. I've interviewed guys, everybody from Magic Johnson to Tiger Woods. And I think anytime you're interviewing a player or a celebrity, someone who has a big time status, I think you always get a little bit of anxiousness, kind of excitedness. And I think that's part of the fun that comes with the gig. I was kind of thrown into the fire my first day as an intern at Fox 47 in Lansing, Michigan, my junior year of college. The sports guy, this is market 115, so a small market. And the sports guy that day called in sick. And I was the only other person in the sports department. And they said, intern, you're up. So I had to do the sports that night. My first day as an intern for Fox 47 in Lansing. You talk about getting thrown into the fire. So I had a 2-minute sports cast. And, I learned how to do the ins and outs and stuff in class, but, nothing prepares you for that real life experience, that real world experience, which is what I got instantaneously. And the news director called me into her office the next day and she said, "Hey, that was very impressive, young man, the way you handled yourself under difficult circumstances." And lo and behold, they ended up hiring me that summer before my senior year as the weekend sports anchor at Fox 47 in Lansing. So all because of that one little twist of fate, I was able to show what I could do, and it ended up springboarding my career, so to speak.
Yeah. So this is a two-part question. And what were the main things that you learned in high school and college that got you to this point now? And how did the ABC opportunity come about for you?
So when you're growing up, you're kind of learning, the ins and outs of the industry, what to do, what not to do, how to write, how to edit, how to produce stories, how to shoot stories, because, I was a cameraman, producer, writer, anchorman. I did everything at these, as most TV people do when you're first starting out in these smaller markets. So I think you learn a little bit of everything. You also make a lot of mistakes on the air. You kind of, it's like being in the minor leagues. You get your strikeouts out of the way. You become a better batter in the minor leagues before you're ready to get called up into the big leagues. And that same kind of philosophy applies in this business too, where you kind of hone your craft in the smaller markets. So when you're ready for an opportunity like ABC in New York, the number one station in the number one market, when that comes along, you feel like you've done your time and everything you've done in your life and in your career prepares you for this moment. And now 4.5 years in, it's kind of crazy to think that I'm here and talking to you about it, but here we are. And I was at Fox Sports 1. I helped launch that network back in 2013. I was a part of the original cast. And, through no fault of my own, they kind of rebranded the network to become more of talking heads with Skip and Shannon. You have that Undisputed show with Skip and Shannon. You've got Colin Coward and all their shows that are all talking head debate shows now. And they hired me to be a host / sports anchor to do highlights and things like that. And when my contract came up, they frankly just didn't have enough for me to do because they had changed the direction of the network. So my agent went to work, and thankfully this job was available here at ABC in New York, and I was able to land gracefully, and I haven't looked back ever since. It's been an amazing opportunity, but I'm thankful for everything, every opportunity in my career that has gotten me here to this point.
Man, you could have been a great debater on FS1, man, with Shannon Sharp and Skip.
Yeah, man, I would have loved to fill in. They had me doing some stuff like hosting roundtables and things like that. So I was doing a lot of that stuff on our old show, Fox Sports Live, where I would be able to interject opinions and things like that, which frankly, I don't get a lot of chances to do that now as a sports anchor here in New York, because it's just more telling the highlights or telling the facts, showing the highlights. We don't get a lot of opportunities to editorialize, if you will. I also did some radio when I was in LA, hosting a national syndicated show on Sundays for Fox Sports Radio, where I worked with Jim Jackson and Brady Quinn and some of these guys that were my host, Robert Smith. I had a bunch of different co-hosts that we would bring in from time to time. So I had a lot of opportunities there to kind of share my opinions on things, which was very nice. But maybe one day I'll go down that road again. But in the meantime, I'm loving life here in New York and doing the TV thing.
Yeah, so obviously you've been covering a lot of sports throughout your career in person, and so for you moving ahead here, because last year all of us went through a tough time with the pandemic, and hopefully we're actually some little normalcies here coming up this year. But what have you guys learned as reporters, journalists from last year when the sport shut down, not knowing what's going to happen and possibly losing jobs? But what did you do for yourself? Like obviously work from home, and I'm sure a lot of Zoom meetings, right?
A lot of Zoom meetings. Go ahead.
Yeah, what have you guys learned from the last year to now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we learned that we can do this job whether we're in the clubhouse, in the locker room, in the dressing room, talking to players or not, because Zoom has allowed this podcast. It's allowed all sorts of things that we didn't think were possible, that you thought you had to be a little bit more hands-on. Now, do we miss a lot of that hands-on interaction? Most definitely. When you're interviewing somebody over Zoom, it's like talking to somebody on the phone as opposed to talking to them in person. It's a completely different conversation. You can't read body language. Like it's just very different. And it's harder to ask follow-up questions because you're in a Zoom group with, 40 other reporters. So, do I miss the old days? No doubt. Am I thankful that I still have a job in this climate, in this environment? No question. I'm one of the few people in this building that's been in the office since day one of the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
I thankfully close by, and they gave me the option to work from home. And I said, look, I would much rather come into the office. I think it looks better. I think it sounds better. Plus, it gets me out of the apartment. I'm going crazy being here. So they were able to allow me to come in and do the sports. So I'm one of the few people, I guess, even in the country that's been able to come in this entire time during the pandemic and do the sportscast from the studio, which I think is very important. And thankfully, my bosses agreed. And, there's been a lot of perseverance, by a lot of people, or shown by a lot of people in my industry, as they've had to overcome a lot of different things and obstacles. And, sadly, a lot of people lost their jobs. And a lot of stations and companies and corporations were in hiring freezes during all this. But to your point, I think we're starting to, finally see the light, and, restrictions are being lifted, and things are slowly but surely getting back to normal. And hopefully that means a boom for the sporting industry as well.
Yeah. So now, what's it like seeing fans back in the stadiums, and also players back on the field? And what's it like seeing sports back now with fans in it?
I mean, it just feels like it's supposed to. It feels like the pandemic in a weird way never happened. I was at Citi Field Friday night, this past Friday, for Jacob deGrom's start against the Padres, and it was the first game where the Mets had 34,000. They had increased their capacity to 34,000, which was basically more than double that they had in the previous capacity during the pandemic. And the stadium was just alive. I mean, it felt like a playoff game. And just to hear, I mean, you're a sports fan, I'm a sports fan at heart, and you never lose that, even being in this industry. just being in the house and hearing the roar of the crowd and the smiles on people's faces, it just felt normal. It's probably the best way to describe it. And I don't think you can put a price on that, what that means to so many people. And, it just came down moments ago. The Yankee Stadium is going to be at full capacity
Oh,
starting
wow.
this Friday against
Nice.
Oakland. So, the stadium holds 54,000 people. Will they have a sellout? I hope so. I hope they pack the place. And, we're going to have full houses for football this fall. And, we went through a lot of dark times as a society and as people to get to this point. And I think the celebration is going to be deserving of that. And it's going to be probably the craziest summer, especially here in New York City, that we've ever seen. And, the sporting events are a big part of that. And it's just great to see them come back to life.
Yeah, so we usually do this fun little segment towards the end of the show. We're going to do it right now. It's called the rapid fire segment. You ready for this?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So what's it like? All right. Obviously, you guys are lucky to cover Jacob deGrom. What's it like seeing him go out every fifth day? And obviously, he's dominant every fifth start. And this guy has a 0.62 ERA. It's like unbelievable what I'm seeing from him.
It's unbelievable what everybody's seeing from him. I mean, he's probably going to be the National League MVP as it stands right now. And the guy is not only the best pitcher in baseball this season, but he might end up being the best pitcher of his generation. I mean, every game he just comes out. If he gives up a run, you're surprised. He has more runs batted in than runs he's given up this season, which is incredible. So the guy, there's not enough superlatives to describe Jacob deGrom and what he's meant not only to the Mets but to baseball. And to be here in town watching it every night is just unbelievable.
Yeah, so I'm a Yankee fan, and we're on the downside right now. And how concerned are you from a scale from 1 to 10 that the Yankees might miss the playoffs? And can Cashman like regroup? I think Boone. I don't know what's going to happen to Boone. But what do you think? How concerned are you?
Well, I'm very concerned because this is the same team now that's basically been on the field for 2019, 2020, and 2021. It's the same problems. They don't have timely hitting. They can't run the bases. The defense isn't great. Their starting pitching is not only not deep, but it's not great outside of Garrett Cole. And I think they're only 500 in Garrett Cole starts this season, if I'm not mistaken. So they're 8.5 games back, 4 games back of the final wild card. And, we saw this during the pandemic shortened season last year, all these problems. So I'm not surprised to see them at this point. I don't know how much of that is Aaron Boone's fault when you look at the roster and how it's, constructed. I think Brian Cashman has a lion's share of the blame here as well. So I'll be curious to see. I don't think anything happens this season in terms of Aaron Boone or Cashman, but if they don't make the playoffs this season, I guarantee there will be some changes made by the Steinbrenner family coming up this offseason.
Yeah, so I watched the Michael Kay show. Rosenberg said if the Yankees continue to struggle and the Mets go on the rise, he says it's going to be a Mets town pretty soon. Do you agree?
Well, everybody's quick to say that, but I do think when you look at the fan bases, Giants, Jets, Knicks, Nets, Islanders, Rangers, I do think the smallest gap in fan bases is between the Yankees and Mets.
Yeah,
it might be 55-45 or 51-49. I mean, there's a ton of Mets fans. So I think, could that pendulum swing? I think it would take more than 1 year. I think it would take, a decade of sustained success by the Mets and, the Yankees looking like the Mets for so long to where kids growing up would become Mets fans instead of Yankees fans. I think that would be the transition. But, the Mets are the real deal this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And they are certainly the better team in town at the moment.
Yeah. So what would you say your most memorable game that you covered and obviously you said Grant Hill, but outside of Grant Hill, most memorable interview?
Most memorable interview, boy, oh boy. I interviewed Kid Rock after the Pistons beat the Lakers in 2004. I'm a Detroit guy. So when they beat the Pacers, to face the Lakers in the NBA Finals, Kid Rock was in the celebratory locker room with the Pistons. And I said to him, how much are you looking forward to this series against the Lakers? He goes, man, LA's all Showtime. LA's all glitz and glamour. We're Detroit hustle. We're the grit and grind of the Motor City. He's like, we're going to go out there and kick the crap out of them. And at the time I was working for Fox Sports Detroit, which was on cable. And he says, oh, wait, this is cable. We're going to go out there and kick the shit out of them. So at that point we were like, hey, we apologize for the language, Kid Rock. Colorful as always, back to you. Because he had been drinking obviously heavily. So that was probably one of my more memorable interviews. And, memorable moments when I was in, growing up a Pistons fan, when I was in the locker room when they won the championship in 2004 and champagne flying. I mean, it was a pretty cool moment. And I know as a professional, you're supposed to put those feelings to the side, but quietly and internally, I couldn't help but feel excited. The little kid in me was very much thrilled as to what was going on at that time.
So the Islanders winning Game 2 tonight. Do you think they have a chance to win the series?
I think they have a great chance right now to win the series, whether they win tonight or not. I mean, they already won Game 1 on the road. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. I do think Tampa wins tonight because it'll be desperation time for them. But the barn's going to be rocking Thursday and Saturday for Games 3 and 4. And I would love to see the Islanders. I think Vegas beats Montreal. I would love to see a Vegas Islanders Stanley Cup final. Wouldn't that be something? Islanders first time back in the Cup final since 1984. So that would be very cool indeed.
So what are your thoughts on the new New York Rangers hire as a
Gerard Gallant, a Red Wings legend. A lot of Red Wings fans, obviously growing up in Detroit, like I said, I have a lot of friends who are disappointed by this because they wanted him to be the next Red Wings coach. I mean, when you take speaking of Vegas, when you take a team in their first year of existence to the Stanley Cup final, I think you're doing something right. I mean, he's a player's coach, maybe not the best X's and O's guy, but he's going to bring a respect to that locker room. Being a former player, I think David Quinn's biggest issue was that he came from the college ranks. And, when you're coming from that into a professional environment, I think it's hard to kind of win over the dressing room. So I think that was part of the reason why he didn't succeed. Obviously, the roster wasn't what it needed to be for the Blue Shirts as well. But I like Chris Drury as the new GM. I think he's no nonsense. I love the hire for Gallant, and hopefully better days are ahead for the Blue Shirts.
So obviously tonight, the Nets season could come down to tonight because, in my opinion, I told my friends earlier today that if the Nets lose, then they're done. They need to win Game 5 at home, and there's some news out there that they switched Harden to doubtful. Do you think he can play tonight?
Yeah, in fact, they upgraded him to questionable.
Oh,
and yeah, Shams from I think it's Bleacher Report now he works for said that he plans on playing tonight,
okay,
barring any setback. And the season, I think to your point, Nathan, I think whoever wins tonight's game wins the series. I think if Harden comes back, has a big game, or even if he takes some of the pressure off Durant, I think Durant can go for 35, 40. And I think they beat Milwaukee. I mean, they won the first 2 games by 23 points by average at Barclays. And most people thought this series was done, but just like that, one injury to Kyrie changes the whole complexion of this series. So they need to get Harden back. The question is, how healthy will he be? How effective will he be? I guess we'll find out the answer to that. But just having him on the court will no doubt lift a big burden off of Kevin Durant in a huge Game 5 tonight.
So if Harden is healthy enough, I just want to bring this up. Do you think the Nets need Kyrie Irving also to win a championship? Can they win with Harden and Durant only?
I think you could win with the big 2. I like their chances better with the big 3. But this goes to show why losing Game 3 was such a big deal, because they could have wrapped it up tonight. Yeah. They had him on the ropes in Game 3, arguably should have won. So you could have wrapped it up tonight, and then you have 5-6 days off before your next series. Kyrie can get healthy. There was a report today that it looks like Kyrie's not going to play in this series altogether, which is probably the right move. So you let him rest and get better so he can be somewhat effective against what I think will be Philadelphia in the next round. Can they win the championship with just the 2 of them? Yes, I think they can.
And the last 2 things here before I let you go, our team is part of this foundation called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach. He's now the assistant offensive coordinator with Eddie George at Tennessee State. We're trying to help him prevent human trafficking and making sure the community stays safe and the kids stay safe. So I'll send you the page. You can go check it out.
Great. That'd be awesome, man. That's a great cause and something that's very important.
Yeah. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Well, thank you for everything that you've done. I mean, you should be celebrating more than anybody today by having these, especially here in the state of New York. All the restrictions are lifted. We've reached 70% vaccination, and we wouldn't have gotten there without your help and hard work and dedication. And you just mean so much to all of us, and we can't thank you enough for all that you did to get us through those dark times.
Yeah, well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 820 with the great sports reporter, Ryan Field from ABC. Go follow him on all social media formats. It was truly an honor for you to be joining the show. We would like to have you back as a returning guest at some point so you can meet the full team. But just keep up the great work, and you and your family stay safe.
Thanks, Nathan. Means a lot. Appreciate it, my friend.
Yep.